Thank you much, Honorable Vice Chairman. I rise to speak on the Finance Bill and the Appropriation Bill, which though already approved by the Lok Sabha, we are still concerned, we are still pained about many issues that have arisen from this Finance Bill. And I thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity to discuss this bill and bring our issues for the kind attention of the Honorable Finance Minister. Sir, it's a sad day to have this debate listed in this House, because the first thing you do when you get up early morning is read the Economic Times, and right from page 1 to the last page, all you read about is gloom to deepen India Incorporated, no confidence on business and the political economy, foreign investments expected to slow down, populism to worsen, low on confidence, low on certainty, a wake-up call for UPA. There is nothing, sir, in this newspaper to give any confidence, to give any enthusiasm for a young man like me to look into investing in India, to look into the future of India. And as they rightly say, Moody's adds insult to injury. The rating of 3 of our best banks is downgraded and brought at par with the sovereign rating, which in the first phase is not something to be very proud of. The rupee stays in a hole at 53.97 to a dollar. There's nothing to enthuse the world, nothing to enthuse the Indian investor, nothing to enthuse even the middle class, the poor people, corporate world. Nobody is enthused in the present economic climate in the country. The FM mentioned in his budget that he has to be cruel to be kind. Cruel he was, kind in certain parts. I'm glad that he was kind enough to correct some of the mistakes that I hope were inadvertent when he presented his budget, but I hope he will repair them, rectify them and bring them in a better form. And I think we put in a lot of effort in the Standing Committee recommendations on the Direct Tax Code, which he has very kindly said he will take into consideration. I can only appeal to the FM to look at those recommendations in the true letter and spirit, sir. Don't let them get bogged down in bureaucratic hurdles, which typically happens when good ideas or good recommendations come to the political leadership of the day. Sir, we have just celebrated 60 years of Indian Parliament. This is also a time to reflect, as we did on Sunday, on the state of the Indian economy. After 65 years of independence, we have gone through 6 decades of distinct characteristics in the India growth story. We had the 50s when we had the pain of partition, the planned economy model, the socialist model, where state investments in core manufacturing and heavy industries with technology largely from the Eastern Bloc gave us a GDP growth of about 4%. In the 60s, we had the pain of 3 wars, but we also had the Green Revolution initiated in 1963 and nationalization of many sectors such as banking. We got a growth of about 3% during that period. In the 1970s, there was the pain of political instability. In the emergency, many of the colleagues sitting in this House were imprisoned. We went through a period of turmoil in the country. A government which had come on the slogan of Garibi Hatao in 1971, which I personally believe sowed the seeds of vote bank politics in this country, was absolutely unable to manage the political environment, and we had a situation of turmoil. Despite that, the GDP grew by 4.5%. In the 80s, there was hope. A young man was elected as Prime Minister after addressing some of the security issues that were prevailing in certain parts of the country. We had great hope at that point of time. I was a young man. I was in my teens at that time, sir. Unfortunately, despite averments to say that he will stop leakages in the government system, which had gone as high as 85%, as quoted by the Honorable Finance Minister at that time, the country was saddled with major corruption scandals. And once again, we saw a period of uncertainty. We saw the rise of sectarian politics. and the GDP remained at about 5% growth. As my colleague was saying, the Hindu rate of growth, which we saw for about 3 decades. Sir, 1990, the 1990s were a decade of extraordinary challenges, extraordinary changes with the collapse of the centrally planned economies. It started with the Gulf War, which led to sharp increase in oil prices. The payment crisis of 1991 that the country faced, sir, and the Honorable Finance Minister referred to it in his speech in the other house, was not simply due to deterioration of the trade account. It was accompanied by other adverse developments on the capital account, reflecting the loss of confidence in the government's ability to manage the situation. And I am quoting this from a statement of the Government of India titled the payment crisis of 1991. The cost of credit rose sharply. There was outflow of NRI deposits, and the IIP, sir, fell from August 90 to November 91 from 10.9% to minus 1.5%. There was also evidence of expectation of default, therefore of devaluation also. And these were creating significant imbalances in the economy. All this in a short span of 9 months, sir. I am saying all this to highlight that when we see the situation today, we are coming very close to a situation like that. The Honorable Finance Minister has used some statistics in the other house while replying to the debate, where he said this, we still have 7 months of forex to cover our imports. Our short-term debt has reduced significantly, short-term debt to GDP. Our external position is not as bad as it was. But sir, I beg to differ with the Honorable Finance Minister. Today's situation shows the forex reserves are at 16.9% of the GDP, as the Honorable Finance Minister himself said. The import cover has come down to 7.3 months from 14 months. External debt is still 20% as a proportion of GDP, and short-term debt is now 26.3%. So the situation may look quite cozy in terms of numbers to the Finance Minister, but when you juxtapose it to the high level of $130 billion of repayment in the next 12 months, with the FII investments worth $200 billion in the Indian market, and large NRI deposits, all of it, sir, is hot money. All of it, sir, there can be a flight of capital in the climate that the country is in today, in the negative mood, the negative sentiment prevailing. All of this, sir, are worrying whether in the next 6 to 9 months, the Honorable Finance Minister, often quoting coalition trouble, will be able to handle the situation and improve the fiscal position. Of course, I don't subscribe to this theory of coalition compulsion, because we have run a coalition also, sir. We have had almost the same allies that this government has. While Mr. Vajpayee ran the government, and I think he ran it very credibly, he ran it taking the coalition partners into confidence, he respected the sentiments of the coalition partners, and he respected state-center relations and federalism. I am sure if this government was to look at these issues more seriously with an open heart and an open mind, they would also not have such serious problems with their partners. Sir, apart from the new government which came up in 1991, gave us a period of economic liberalization and substantial reforms. Some structural reforms on trade, industry, the policy framework was improved, and certainly there was some fiscal correction, some fiscal discipline, which was necessary to restore the macroeconomic balance in the economy. But then, we cannot deny the economy came back on track for a few months or a few years. But what did they leave behind for the NDA to inherit in 1998? There was inflation at 9.3%, the growth was at 5% of GDP, agricultural growth was negative, industrial production down, export performance less than 3% growth in the last year, fiscal deficit at 6.1% of GDP, capital market in the doldrums, and huge infrastructure bottlenecks. The NDA was given a government with all these problems. Apart from that, India also had to face an unprecedented financial turmoil. The East Asian financial crisis in '98, followed quickly by economic sanctions after the famous Pokhran nuclear tests, which finally brought India into the League of Nuclear Nations and made us a proud country. We also had to face the Kargil war. Despite all that, in the decade of the 2000s, the NDA government focused on fiscal consolidation, business and trade liberalization. We had insurance, banking, telecom, power, land ceiling laws, political reforms, the FRBM Act, huge road development and airport privatization program, a very successful disinvestment program, and overall we strengthened the macroeconomic parameters. So the UPA government came back to power in 2004, and I quote from the economic survey of 2004-05 prepared by the UPA government. They say the economy had registered a growth of 8.5% in 3-4. Agriculture grew at 9.6%, industry 6.6%, services maintained 9.1%. Inflation was down to 5.5%. The CPI was at 2.2% inflation, consumer price index, in April 2004. The external debt position, thanks to prepayment of costly debt and rationalization of interest rates, had improved significantly. We had low interest rates. The forex reserves had gone up to $113 billion, which showed almost 40% year-on-year growth. Current account surplus was there for the last 3 years of NDA rule. The debt sustainability indicators were in the positive. The external debt as a proportion of GDP was at 17.8%. And the share of short-term debt, which the Honorable Finance Minister was very happy to report at 20%, was only 4.3% when we laid down office. Fiscal deficit was at 4.6%. This is what we gave them in inheritance, sir. And then look what they have done in the last 8 years of UPA rule. Every economic parameter has deteriorated. Look at the current year 11-12 figures. GDP growth has been revised to 6.9%. I humbly submit that figure is not going to be achieved. Look at the last quarter numbers as they are coming out. Every number is showing less than projected. I suspect the GDP will be at 6.5% last year. We have double-digit inflation. Forex reserves have fallen in the last year to $293 billion. The fiscal deficit is at 5.9%. And again, the last quarter results can make that deteriorate further. Sir, the S&P downgrade says it all. They have projected a negative outlook on long-term credit servicing capability of India. This could lead to a possible downgrading of the sovereign rating within the next 24 months. There is little progress in economic reforms, they say. The GDP growth will decline further. Fiscal deficit is unmanageable and may shoot up as subsidies will rise. Sir, when the NDA was in power, we are proud to say that the ratings had improved from a negative to a positive outlook when the NDA government ran. Even the Fitch ratings had improved during the NDA government. But what has happened now? And sir, please don't take the ratings lightly. This decline in the Sensex following the rating, this rush of FII flowing out of the country, the stoppage of any new proposals, no FDI, no FII coming into the country. Well, the government may claim that in March $8 billion came out, but as an investment banker, I would like to submit that the $8.1 billion included a deal which was consummated 6 months before. Over $6 billion of that was only from that deal. And right now, there is absolutely no business in the market. All new investments have stopped, sir. There is an impetus for outflow of funds rather than inflow of funds. Indian businessmen, and the Economic Times report says that, Indian businessmen are looking to invest outside the country. They have no confidence in my country anymore. And this despite the fact that we have one of the most learned, one of the most experienced finance ministers at the helm of affairs. Well, the FM did say it's a timely warning and there is no need to panic. I suspect, sir, he did not need the S&P to give him this timely warning. In this very house, when I spoke on 11th August 2011, in the appropriation bill number 3, I had said, and I quote, India could get into a situation of downgrade similar to the US situation now, and the country cannot afford any downgrade at this stage, which will result in an increase in the cost of our international borrowing. A common man can tell you what is happening in the economy, sir. Of course, the economic advisor has also revealed all when he says in the IMF in Washington, the state of affairs of this government. Sir, please do not blame everything on global factors alone. We have a huge domestic economy, a huge domestic consumption demand. We have a huge demographic dividend to benefit from. The business environment today is shattered. The business environment wants confidence. The Indian entrepreneur, the Indian investor is more than enough to overcome all these difficulties if only the government of the day would give an impetus to their efforts. But in the aftermath of this series of scandals, governance issues which have come to fore have left this government paralyzed. Licenses get cancelled. There is no clear policy on spectrum allocation. We don't know what will happen to the arbitration that global companies have initiated against India, and many of them are now talking of withdrawing from India. Sir, the message has gone out that the government of India no longer cares about attracting investment. And I very respectfully submit the Honorable Finance Minister did not do justice when he said in the other house that India can live without foreign investment. Certainly India can live without foreign investment. I am the last fellow to say we need only foreign investment. But the pragmatic view, and I have tons and tons of cuttings here of the Honorable Finance Minister, of the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Commerce Minister, going all over the world, almost begging for foreign investment, coming to this house and almost pleading with this house to support multi-brand retail FDI. Is that the only form of FDI to attract investment? FDI is permitted in 100 other sectors. Why is that FDI not coming? What makes you to believe that multi-brand FDI will come, but FDI will not come in setting up cold storages, infrastructure, roads, airports? That is because of the policy paralysis that this government has gone into. The benchmark indices have declined drastically since March 16, the date of presentation of the budget. And as we all know, the rupee is depreciating. FDI investments have dried up in the last two months. Sir, this budget was an opportunity to change all this negative perception about India. We had no elections around the corner. It could have laid a roadmap for the future. However, all sections of society were let down, as I will explain a little further. This total policy paralysis, non-movement of reform, no focus on energy security, no focus on investment in infrastructure, no focus on health and education, no focus on the farmer on whose sweat and toil this country runs. What is this government giving to the people of India? The power sector is starved of coal, of raw material. They are lying idle. There's no coal, there's no oil, there's no gas. Infrastructure development is stagnating because ministries within the government don't see eye to eye. An environment ministry is out to stick me all projects. The finance ministry and the Reserve Bank together have made investments so expensive that it is unviable today. Health and education, there's that incremental increase in spending that the budget shows. But there's no focus on quality. We have huge NRHM scams, we have huge Manrega scams. Social spending is good, sir, we are not against it. But social spending should be directed. Social spending should result in creation of infrastructure and in the well-being of the people. There are no concrete measures to promote agriculture in this budget, as I will show later. Sir, the disinvestment targets are not met. Disinvestment is not a year-end phenomenon. You don't do disinvestment of ONGC in the last quarter of the year. And then when you do it, you mess it up. You have bureaucrats advising you to keep the share price over and above the market price of that day. I'm amazed that this government has advisors. They should be sacked forthwith if that is the level of advice they give to this government. And when only 5% of the disinvestment program is subscribed on that crucial day, what does the government do? The finance ministry steps in, they put pressure on a PSU like LIC and make the LIC subscribe to 95% of the issue after closing hours. I demand that a whole investigation should be done on this and a white paper should come out. Is that the cause of the LIC being downgraded? in the current Moody's round. We must know where the truth lies, sir. There are residual stakes of Hindustan Zinc and Balco, which are low-hanging fruits this government can encash. I don't know why they can't take decisions on anything. I don't think they need coalition partners' approvals for this day-to-day decision-making. I think, sir, India's finances are held hostage to political whims. We need to move out of vote bank politics. We need to see fiscal prudence. We need to see cost of borrowing going down, capital investment being encouraged. We need to respect investors' sentiment and domestic consumption. Sir, in the last few years, tax revenue has only been used to fund short-term political gains. Investment activity is only given lip service. As I had mentioned in this house earlier, in the last 8 years of this government, revenue expenditure has gone up by over 300% at an average, plan and non-plan, whereas capital expenditure has not even gone up by 100%. Sir, the future generations are going to hold all of us responsible for the situation we are leading this country to and for what we will leave behind for them to suffer. So this policy flip-flop, the finance bill, not this year but in the last year, provided for MAT and DDT on special economic zones. Now, special economic zones were a visionary policy introduced by the NDA. We had expected them to be large format zones in rural hinterland, largely on wastelands, with independent and new infrastructure, tax benefits and easier operating laws to reduce the pressure on existing villages. We wanted to create jobs. We wanted exports to grow. We wanted Indian competitiveness in manufacturing to be there. What did this government do, sir? In UPA 1, they approved over 700 SEZs against the 2 that were approved by NDA. They approved over 700 SEZs, as small as 20-acre SEZ in the heart of Mumbai. And I don't know how many SEZs in Gurgaon outside Delhi. They messed up a beautiful law, and then when they realize that it has gone out of hand, they bring in MAT and DDT without any grandfathering provisions. This uncertainty has led to a complete loss of confidence in the ability of this government and the sincerity of this government to attract foreign investment. Sir, investment and saving rates are falling. The monetary policy which is being used to arrest inflation is only causing more pain. In this climate of policy flip-flop, they bring in a large number of retrospective amendments. Nobody is against taxing foreign incomes which relate to assets in India. I think this whole house can unanimously support such a resolution. But to make it retroactive in nature, to make the people lose confidence in the judicial system of India, where the Supreme Court of India makes a certain ruling. If the Supreme Court could not understand and interpret the law as, anyway, it was a Congress government when the IT Act came in, as the government had formed it. If the Supreme Court cannot interpret it, all of us chartered accountants, none of us could interpret it. Lawyers could not interpret it. But the bureaucrats, I'm not blaming the finance minister because I'm sure he has been misfed with information, say no, the law has to be clarified. And in 1961, we meant it as follows. Now, if they had to bring a clarification to just attack one company, they should have done it in 2007, 2008, as the United Kingdom has done, as China has done. The Honorable Finance Minister has quoted. I have all the details, sir, here. There's not much time. I could have delved on each of the retrospective amendments in USA, China, in UK. All of them, sir, grandfather the past. The UK amendment, sir, you talk about, grandfathered the decisions of the court when they brought in retrospective amendments. And the second amendment, which I spoke to the Honorable Finance Minister of UK, he said it was brought within 2 months of the event occurring. And it was to tax a particular transaction. It was discussed with that corporate and it was settled that yes, this is how it is, this is how we are clarifying it. There's a complete absence of consistent and coherent decision making in this government, sir. The oil and gas sector is suffering. Inequalities in the country are increasing. And overall, there is a sense of doom and gloom, which is stated in the newspapers every day. Sir, I want to make a few suggestions. Let us focus on agriculture. with 15% of GDP but 55% of population dependent on it, I think planned target of 4% is not enough.
Mr. Goyal.
We need to look at incremental growth.
Mr. Goyal.
I've talked to my leaders. We have only one speaker. He needs 2-3 minutes. So don't worry.
Only one?
Yeah, only one.
Even then...
Yeah, don't worry. We'll stick to our time.
Yeah.
Unless the Honorable FM tells me to sit down. He doesn't want to hear
Yes,
this.
yes.
So the planned target of 4% is not enough. We need to look for incremental gains in productivity. We need massive requirements to meet the food security bill that the extra constitutional bodies are now forming and possibly we'll see in this house. That additional requirement will have to be met by imports, and that level of imports will make international prices of food grains rise exponentially, and the forex drain on the country will be huge. Not to say, sir, I am against food security, but food security not by imports, food security by encouraging my farmer to produce more, by giving him low-cost credit, by giving him money when he needs it most, by giving him low-cost, high-quality seeds, by not making fertilizer prices increase by 250% in 1 year between 2010 and 2011, by giving storage facilities and warehouse chain so that his food grains are not allowed to rot, and if I may just add, by giving him jute bags in time so that he doesn't have to suffer an ignominious loss of his produce. So that is what we need to address. The way forward, sir, would be to infuse technology in our farms. It will be to invest in the infrastructure in the farms, make prices commensurate with the cost of production, incentivize private sector participation in the farm infrastructure by giving viability gap funding, because by itself it's not viable. Work closely with the states, this being a state subject, to bring in uniform laws all over the country. Sir, there is risk of food insecurity in the coming years, and water shortages are looming large. There is an ecological risk in Punjab and Haryana due to deterioration of soil and fall in the water table. We need to encourage crop rotation and stop grain monocropping there. Overall, sir, I think agriculture needs a focus which is sadly lacking in this government. Health, sir, is the other sector which I would like to talk about. Outlays have been increased, but there is no strategy to address the lack of infrastructure in the public health care delivery mechanism. Primary health centers are in a mess. There's huge shortage of doctors and nurses. There's no effort in capacity building. It's so difficult to get a medical college in this government because they can't even appoint and have an election to the Medical Council of India. The budget is all about Asha, but I think it has left all of us with Nirasha, sir. The NRHM corruption and misuse of funds need to be stopped. I think the government should seriously look at investing more of the GDP on health and increase the health linkages in the sector with the private sector. Something like the UK model where doctors set up their primary health centers and the government funds their budgets, or the Vatsalya hospital, or the Narayanan Rudale experiment in Andhra Pradesh, which was their own government. Sir, in education, the less said the better. They can keep tom-tomming any figures of literacy, but they don't mean anything when their own esteemed colleagues in the treasury benches point out to us that a 9th standard student can't read a 3rd standard textbook. We need 500 more skilled people in this country in the next 10 years. And what kind of capacity building do we have? We can at best make 5 million people developed in skills in this country. You have a very illustrious person in Mr. Ramadurai to head the Skill Development Corporation. But I think unless we dovetail some more projects, we dovetail education, skill development, and I would also suggest Manrega into one, we will never achieve skill development. Because the poor man is not going to come for skill development losing wages. I was going to recommend that Manrega should be dovetailed with skill development and people given money to develop their skills over a period of time. That way we can actually invest not 3,000 crores in skill development that they have provided, but possibly 40,000 crores. So job creation is the need of the hour. Jobs will come in manufacturing, jobs can come in tourism, jobs can come in housing. And what have we done? We have just announced a manufacturing policy, but we have dismally failed to create new jobs. The share of manufacturing has fallen to 16%. None of the issues relating to availability of land, connectivity, infrastructure, skills and finance at reasonable cost have been addressed. There's multiple level of taxation, labor laws need to be rationalized, there's shortage of power and water, and the environment ministry, the less said the better. Manufacturing is at a standstill in this country. Tourism, this budget allocates 1,282 crore for tourism, which is 1% of the budget, sir. Malaysia allocates 5.1%, China 3.8%, and Singapore 9.1% of the budget. We had 6.27 million international tourists last year. We can only head our heads in shame. Even China and Dubai, which are one city-states, have more international tourists than the whole of India. The USA had 62 million tourists, international tourists last year. And what do? We increase the burden of service tax on tourism. We don't create any infrastructure in the tourism locations. We don't provide any incentives to the private enterprises. We don't give any tax holiday from civic and state and central taxes, because tourism is like export and there is adequate possibility to earn revenues out of tourism, forex revenues, to help the Honorable
Mr.
Finance Minister manage.
You have taken 31 minutes, only 12 minutes left for your colleague.
He is my colleague, he's right here. You can ask him.
No, he is not the person. It is Purushottam
He's
Rupala.
not speaking. He's not
Rupala.
speaking. Only one more.
Only one. Only reason.
On housing, sir, the budget is silent.
But anyhow,
Except providing 150% weighted deduction, there is nothing else to make affordable housing, to give an encouragement and impetus to the housing sector. We need an easier regulatory and environmental approach and low interest costs to make houses available to all in this country. Infrastructure, sir, which is the most important sector, is begging for this government's mercy. We need to give an impetus to infrastructure projects through effectively using the viability gap funding mechanism. Environment and regulatory approvals should be obtained by the government before they allocate projects to the private sector, rather than private sector running pillar to post and failing to get any approvals in time. The high cost of interest, again, and unavailability of long-term capital make infrastructure projects unviable. In fact, sir, another scheme for Manrega.
now please conclude.
You could possibly dovetail Manrega with viability gap funding and promote 1 lakh crores worth of projects using that 40,000 crores. It would still put 40,000 crores into the people's hands, because labor cost is 40 to 50% of infrastructure projects. Sir, the roads program is at a complete standstill, hardly 4 or 5 kilometers of roads a day coming up. The telecom industry, which was a blue-eyed boy, which was a showcase industry, is in a complete mess. They are in a state of flux with uncertainty. The regulatory regime is completely messed up. Scandals and policy paralysis. The costs to the consumers are increasing rapidly. Some recommendations have come out which will take the country back to pre-NTP 99 days. And you will be in a situation where we will again start paying 2 rupees and 3 rupees for the mobile phones that we are so liberally used to making now, sir. Overall, the telecom sector has plunged into uncertainty and a total policy failure. We need to create 200 new airports in this country to connect the length and breadth of this country through low-cost airports. Please also make the taxes competitive. Don't kill the whole industry. Look at Goa. They halved the ATF fuel VAT and are encouraging the airline industry to come in a bigger way. You have major airports in the country which are so costly that nobody in the world wants to come there. Our Indian airports are 10 times the cost of the Dubai International Airport. How are we going to encourage the airport sector? Ports, we need to bring in new ports into the country, expand the rail network. So in the power sector, There is complete policy paralysis. We have been hearing that the government will address these issues, but so far we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I wish they would focus on renewable energy, on solar, wind and bio, which can remove the shortages of power.
Yes, now conclude, please.
I've been unwell for the last 2-3 days.
So, see, for the sake of your health, then you should
Sir,
conclude
in
now.
the finance bill,
Yes,
sir, in the finance
So take
bill, I
care of
just
your
want to
health now.
highlight one or two things. While it is very good that the section 35 AD provides weighted deduction for investment in various sectors, it should be allowed to be set off against the other business income of the company. Otherwise, it's a failed section. You allow it to be set off against income of that same project, which will come over 10 years. That benefit doesn't accrue to the business and it doesn't have any
Yes.
impact on making
Now you have to
infrastructure
conclude.
easier. Also, sir, they have withdrawn GAR.
Now
But in
you
tra-
have to conclude,
But in
please.
transfer pricing
Yes, now please conclude.
sir, in the
Because
indirect taxes.
I have
which
two
are,
names here.
In the taxes which are applicable on indirect transfers, they have not yet clarified the position regarding FII investment and
Yes.
upstream investors.
No, please.
I think the government
No,
needs
please.
to address,
Because I have two names here of your party.
the government needs to
please.
address various
But the
issues
list
in the
too.
finance bill and bring in
Okay.
a sense of
I can cut
confidence
both if you
in the
agree.
economy. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goyal. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Dr. Balchandra Mungekar.
Thank you.
For allowing me to express my views